Spectres, welcome back to the Mass Effect Lorecast. This is your host, Tom, or Robots, and I've got Sam here. Sam, do you know what one of my favorite words is? One of my favorite literature words. One of my favorite, like, high school level literature words.
Esoteric.
That's a good one. That's a very good one. It's not the one I was thinking of. I was thinking denouement.
Denouement.
Denouement. Oh, it's such a French term. Oh, denouement. I feel like, okay, we've been doing this whole Garvug thing for over a month now, and we had to
you know what?
Go ahead.
This Garvok series has been our Bildungsroman.
Okay, so, but before we get into all the details, I wanted to first apologize to our listeners for missing a week. We both had some major events in our lives. One of us got married. The other had to flee from a gigantic weather event that basically destroyed large swaths of Florida. So congratulations on the wedding stuff, Sam.
Thank you. Yeah, and if you're here watching the live stream, then you'll see I'm wearing a wedding band now.
Official.
So I feel old. So my wife and I are now married. We had a very beautiful, intimate ceremony where I'm telling people we got married. We haven't had the wedding yet. That's because, just to be quite frank, we haven't saved up the money for the kind of ceremony that we want, but we wanted to have something special and beautiful. We went up to a mountaintop. Yeah, the weather was beautiful. I'm sorry, the weather was not beautiful for you, Tom.
No. It was completely the opposite.
We literally had like the opposite week where I was on top of a mountain in the Pacific Northwest where I could see for miles and miles, and I got married and there was beautiful photos, and then Tom is in like a flooded swamp.
In a bunker. I had to flee. I had to evacuate because they were, you know how hurricanes are, and they're like, okay, this is the projected path of the storm, but the entire cone is like the state of Florida. And then as it got closer and closer, I live in some, in the middle part of the state, and usually the storms hit like the bottom or the panhandle or whatever, but this thing kept on like narrowing down on the middle of the state, and I was like, oh no. And my wife had to get back from a trip. She was up in Chicago for a work trip, so she had to fly back early. The airport gets shut down a day and a half before the hurricanes hit, so she had to fly back like 2 days earlier than she would have flown back. I had to prepare the house while she wasn't here. I had to put up we got the shutters up on the windows, all that stuff. And then she gets home and we're like, do we leave this time? And we had to do the math and be like, well, power's definitely going to go out. We're just going to have to like hunker down in a powerless house, hoping that the roof doesn't blow off. Maybe we should leave town. So we did.
And that the streets might flood.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, we're close to flooding, but we're not in a flooding zone. And when we got back, one of the roads nearby was a lake, and people were driving into the lake, and it was ridiculous. So yeah, crazy story. Everything worked out. We were safe. We lost power at our house for a few days. We came back when the power came back on. We helped clean everything up, helped out some neighbors, did all that stuff. So we're doing totally fine now. Things are back to normal. But huge congratulations to you. I mean, I get to avoid hurricanes every few years. You hopefully this is.
And now that I'm married, I have to avoid storms for the rest of my life.
Yeah, because yep. Well, you guys don't have kids yet, but you know
not
the phrase.
yet. We got one on the way.
You're right. You know the phrase: if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So.
Yes. So, but yeah, actually, fun fact for our listeners: I learned that that emergency response, they were prepared so well that they had deployed 24 of FEMA's 28 urban search and rescue teams.
Yeah.
Like 24 of the entire nation's urban search and rescue teams were in Florida.
Yes, and on our way out of town, we even saw lineman trucks, the people who help fix the power lines from Canada, with plates from Canada all the way down into Florida. And other fun stats. I know everybody wants us to get to the end of Garvug, but this is fun. Other fun stats about this. When we were watching what was happening from our location a number of hours further away, where the storm was like only tropical storm winds, you could watch the power outages being reported on the app. And it got up to over 600,000 people without power just in our area. That doesn't even include the other major cities or areas around, just in the area that we live. And when we got back home, it was still above 500,000. And we were one of the earliest people. I think we were in the first 100,000 to get our power back. So we were very fortunate about that. But there are still people today without power or water or internet. And the streets still have just garbage of like tree branches and stuff all over the place. It is no joke. It is absolutely no joke. So there you go. Well, those are our adventures.
Well, thankfully, you fared better than the Krogan did on Garvug.
Yeah.
How's that for a secretary?
That's a good, I was kind of going the same direction. We've been doing a podcast long enough to know about moving from one topic to another. But remind us of what happened. It's been a few weeks. Where did we leave off? Because it felt like the story was about to end, but it turns out there's a little bit more to talk about.
Right. Well, it turns out, we learned that basically the corporations were doing this whole thing. They won, by the way, and they were doing this because of Prothean technology. And that is when the council is pissed. That's when the Citadel Council steps in. And it ends with basically Lyra Spate, the former supreme commander of the Sonax Industries Army. Lyra Spate is on the run, and the Citadel spokesperson says, well, if Lyra Spate wants to hide, she better find another galaxy to go to.
And that's when she shows up in Andromeda. I missed that part.
I really thought that's where that was going. Yeah. And I was like, wow, did they lay the groundwork for this all the way back in Mass Effect 2? But then we get the next dispatch, which is where we pick up now. And no, she does not go to Andromeda. It says, the saga of former Core employee, and Core was the new name of Sonax, but the former Core employee, Lyra Spate, has apparently come to an end. A body with a gene print matching that of her Metacard to 99.998% accuracy was presented to a regional medical examiner on the Omega space station. Her bodyguards explained to officials that she was in a hotel and complained of headaches shortly before collapsing and could not be revived. The medical examiner, Earthshock Aranhur, declared her death a result of a massive stroke and concluded there were no signs of foul play. Okay, it's a little too neat and tidy for me to accept at face value, but she was messing with Prothean technology, probably. Lonar Mayroon, one of the several Citadel Spectres assigned to bring in the fugitive admiral, says the evidence satisfies him. She was under considerable stress, he said. I guess it got to her more than she let on. Spate is survived by one brother. She was 47 Earth Standard years old.
Only 47. Also, a Spectre named Lunar Mayroon.
Lonar.
I'm sorry, Lonar. That's such a cool name. Lonar.
It is. Yes. And sorry, I'm trying to look up Lonar Mayroon right now because I'm pretty sure there was another detail about him that now I have forgotten.
It's all right. It's all right.
Oh, right. We already talked about him. He was already involved in the unsuccessful assassination attempt on her, which we thought was probably when their Excelsior command ship blew up.
Right.
So
weird that
so now
Lonar here is involved in both of these situations. Then that's a little on the nose.
It really sounds like he came back to finish the job. Maybe
it really does. It really does. Also, I wonder. It's like 99.998% accuracy on the genetics. Why not 100?
Right.
Like they've got the tech to get down to 0.001%, but yet can't confirm to 100% that this is the same person. Like.
And also that this is fiction.
Right.
So it's like, why not just say it confirmed that it was her?
Right. Also, your DNA only has so many pairs of proteins. Does that mean one of the proteins was switched the wrong way, but the rest of it matched? Like it is a quantitative thing, right? Like you can look at the DNA, you can count the proteins, you can match them all up, put them side by side, right? Like we have the tech to do that today. And yet they still can't get to 100% accuracy on this.
Maybe they didn't want to. Maybe the writer didn't want to go with 100% because that's not like genetic tests are never 100% sure, maybe. At least in our current world.
Yeah, maybe.
So I don't know. But it is kind of like a fitting fate for her if Mayroon did hunt her down and kill her, which it looks like is the case. So basically, unless I'm really missing something big here, I know that there's a lot of people in the Mass Effect forums and community who think, oh, well, maybe Lyra Spates in Andromeda. I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but it doesn't look like she is. It looks like she's dead, unless she pulled like a Houdini.
Yeah, unless this was all a cover story for her to leave the galaxy, and she actually took them up on that.
And then Lonar Mayroon is also just very confident that it's her for some reason.
Or maybe Lonar got paid off.
He could have been. Spectres have not the greatest moral compass.
They've done worse.
Yeah. And also, Lonar Mayroon sounds like a Solarian name. And if Lonar has the typical disposition toward the Krogan that other Solarians do, he may not have cared that much, really.
Right. Like, okay, well, this gets her out of the picture either way. So what's it matter to me?
Yeah. Well, there's only one more Cerberus Daily News dispatch on Garvug.
Okay.
And it comes a year and some change later. That one was from December 2010. This one is from February 24th, 2012. So we go a long period of time, partially because the game had already been out for a while. Mass Effect 2 came out in 2009. So support probably dwindled down after they were working on DLC and whatnot. But in February 2012, we get this update that the official ship for the Citadel Committee on Paleotechnology was shot down over Garvug. Data files on Prothean inventions could be in criminal hands. That's it.
That's the whole thing. I mean, okay.
That's it. That's the tweet.
That's the tweet. That's it. That's the tweet. Everybody get angry now. So one of the things in the previous one is it mentioned she was on Omega. That was like when her body was found on Omega. We've got criminal.
Well, that it was brought to Omega.
Oh, it was brought.
The regional medical examiner was on Omega.
Oh, okay. So she didn't die necessarily on Omega. I'm trying to draw some connections here. I'm like criminal hands, Omega. Maybe there's something going on there.
But exactly, yeah. Still terminus space. So who really knows what happened? It's a lawless wasteland, right?
Right.
But yeah, it's her fate is so like up in the air. She may be dead. She may not be dead. If she is dead, how was she killed? I think this is personally my take. I think it's pointing to she was spending time around quote unquote Prothean artifacts too much. She was getting headaches. She died. We know from the games that if you spend too much time around quote unquote Prothean artifacts, that you may die or suffer some kind of health effect.
It's like one of those drug commercials.
Yeah, it's terrible side effects. Side effects may include sudden death. But yeah, and also
try new Prothean. Prothean available now. Ask your doctor.
I mean, what's the possibility that these weren't actually Prothean artifacts, but that they were Reaper artifacts? The council says the Protheans built the Citadel. The council says the Protheans built the mass relays. And of course, Shepard brings evidence otherwise, but it's not like they listen anyway.
Sure. Right.
So to the rest of the known galaxy, wouldn't Reaper technology kind of resemble Prothean technology? I would
imagine that the layperson in this seeing either would easily confuse both. You know, like a terrible example, but somebody who's a layperson on, say, even Earth archaeology, like, oh, is that an Aztec ruin or is it an Incan ruin? There are hundreds of years between those two things, but most average person would just be like, it looks kind of, I don't know, Native American ruins of some sort.
And beyond that, it sounds like the at least Citadel Space's leading experts on paleotechnology weren't even able to get down there and analyze it. So they wouldn't have even known. Like they were shot down over top of Garvug, and now the latest we know is that the Prothean data it could be in criminal hands, but my question is who could it be?
This doesn't tell us. Yeah, this doesn't tell us who shot it down. Like the chances are it wasn't the people living on Garvug who just wanted peace to begin with, right? Like the Krogan and whoever else is down there at this point. It's 2 years later, so who else has moved in? I don't know. But then the governmental stuff with the Citadel. They're supposed to be there. Who would know that they're supposed to be there? Somebody in the know, maybe. I don't know. Like,
right. Don't you think that after so much violence in the area and such a chaotic kind of collapse of the end of that war, don't you think that the Citadel would have sent like warships to protect the paleo scientists?
Yeah.
Really?
Well,
that they were just shot down and there didn't happen to be anyone else around. And by the way, the data files they were after could be in criminal hands. I don't know. It sounds too convenient to me, but I also think that we need to remember we're getting this through Cerberus Daily News.
Right.
And
right.
I feel like this is a total Cerberus move. If they weren't already, behind some of the corporations like Binary Helix, then they very well could be behind an effort to swoop in and claim the Prothean technology and get lost.
And then define it for everyone using their news source that this was criminals. That criminals did this, right? So it seems like the kind of thing that had to be reported on. It was worth discussing because other news outlets would have been reporting on this because it was the Citadel stuff. It's not like the Citadel it's not like people wouldn't have found out. And so they decided to do a little bit of a cover up here and say, well, this is what happened and now it's in criminal hands. Kind of
right. And yeah. That's it. That's the end of the established lore through Cerberus Daily News that we get about Garvok. It's just kind of left open-ended like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And with questions. I mean, like we've discussed this whole time, this isn't as simple as this happened. And I think most situations just unfortunately aren't when people who have something to gain from the way that they manage that information. So...
But fun fact, you can go there in Mass Effect 3. And when you go there in Mass Effect 3, if you scan the planet, Garvug, you will acquire Prothean data disks. So, I mean, either way.
And you're risking yourself getting shot down by criminals while doing so.
Well, and chased by Reapers, I think.
By Reapers. Yeah.
So yeah, either way, it sounds like at least some of the Prothean data disks are recovered for, Shepard's war effort and for the Crucible. And if I remember correctly, I think that there's also like a side quest tied to it in Mass Effect 3. Yeah. I might be wrong, but I think it's one of those things you pick up walking around the Citadel in Mass Effect 3. I think you hear someone talking about it, and that's why you go and you get the data disks and then take it back. So kind of cool that they weaved it in that way. But yeah, now I feel like it's just important to kind of review everything that we've talked about with Garvug through 3 basic questions. And the first, I think, is... what do you believe the war on Garvug tells us about the way that the council races view the Krogan? And what about the Vorcha?
Yeah, well, I think this one's pretty obvious. It shows that the lives of these individuals from these races are not at the top of their priority list, right? Like they kind of let the situation unfold. They don't rush in. And it's not even until we get the Prothean technology details that all of a sudden the Citadel seems more interested in what's going on.
Right. And it also raises the question for me, did the council already actually know that there was Prothean technology there and used the corporations as a way, like they knew the corporations were going to do this and they used the corporations to exterminate the Krogan there? Maybe. Even after having given the Krogan this bargain world right after the Rachni Wars.
Right. Yeah, I have to wonder how those events happened, in what order. Like, did they give them this world thinking the world was useless, and then all of a sudden information about the technology shows up and they go, uh-oh.
The question is, when did the council know about the Prothean data disks? Yeah. Anyway, that's a Nixon reference.
But. Right. Because it's a big thing. Like if they had suspicions that there were Prothean data disks or technology at all, and they were just like, well, we can at least give this world to these other races and just let them live there, and maybe we'll get around someday to, working out a deal with them where we can send some archaeologists and it'll be a peaceful thing where they'll let us explore for the data and we'll maybe give them a cut of whatever we get or whatever. Like there is a definitely up and up way they could have managed that. But if they didn't go that route, which they don't seem to have gone that route, then it either shows that they didn't know that stuff was there and then they felt that they had to find a way to get it by working with these corporations kind of behind the scenes, or they just didn't know it was there at all. It's the corporations that kind of started this whole thing. And then eventually, through probably one of their specters, they gained that knowledge later. And then that's when they showed interest.
I think that at some point during the war, they learned about the Prothean technology as is reported in Cerberus Daily News updates. But they learned about it, I think, before they acknowledged it publicly.
Probably.
And the fact that they even allowed the war to go on for so long with these Krogan being like just absolutely annihilated on the planet, on their own home planet, and the Vorcha too. It shows us that the council races, as long as they're not politically forced to help the Krogan, they never will.
Yeah.
They never will.
Yeah, it seems like they give them the amount of attention that they would give any of the races that don't have a seat at the table, right? Like there are the races who have, there are the people who sit at the adult table, and then there's all the other races who sit at the kids table, and they can just do whatever they want, and we don't need to worry about them so much because... And all of this comes across very cynical, kind of dark, but it's also very realistic. In most of these kinds of situations, the people who are sitting at the big boy table always have more priority. And the people beyond that don't, because resources are limited. I think the other question that I come to thinking about all of this is the time span that this is all happening. What else was going on that was taking their resources? I would assume that there were more important things going on their list of priorities to the lives of the individuals living on this one planet.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is during the events of Mass Effect 2. So most of our time is spent in the Terminus systems, and we're basically told that we're allowed to keep our Spectre authority, depending on, how you've handled Mass Effect 1. We're told we're allowed to keep our Spectre authority, just don't make it our problem. You're with Cerberus now, so stick outside of Citadel space. So this is going on during Mass Effect 2. Obviously, the Council's not too concerned about the Collectors either. So what are they concerned about? I would say that you could go
doing? It's really the
what
question.
Are they even doing?
Right.
I would say you could go and refer to Mass Effect Ascension, I think it is, the second novel in that trilogy of novels. But even then, that doesn't really detail what the Council's doing so much as what Anderson and the Alliance are doing, and then a later ploy between Anderson and the Turians to ransack a Cerberus base. But that's beyond the point. So basically, I just think it proves that, going off of your point, not just that the Krogans are not at the quote-unquote big boy table in terms of Citadel space politics, but they're not even at the little boy table.
I love that this has gone from adults and children. It's my fault. To big boy, little boy, and then just like not even a person, I guess.
But they're not even at
they're
not at the kids table, because if I'm trying to consider if this had happened to the Elcor, if this had happened to the not the Volus, because they're already a client race of the Turians, so the Turians would be required to step in.
Right.
But if this happened to the Hanar, if this happened to, you name it, any other non-council race, I don't think the council may be more inclined to help them than they were the Krogan.
Well, yeah.
The council has shown this outward kind of, I don't want to say indifference, but almost like a hostile indifference to the welfare of the Krogan.
Here's the difference. The let's call them tiers. A tier races are beneficial because they are productive. They are able to be negotiated with. They have all of these qualities that allow them to be, they have advanced technology, all of these things, right? All of these qualities. That's why they're up here. Then you have these secondary races, like some of the ones you mentioned, who don't have as many of those qualities just inherently, but they can still be worked with. They're seen as negotiable, right? These are people that we can have diplomacy with and we can work with them. And then you have people who are the races that are considered potentially dangerous and have been before by other races on the council. Thus, you have a situation with, these people right here, like both of like the Vorcha, the Krogan, dangerous races in the past. They've done some very dangerous things. The stance against AI technology, same kind of thing. Like you can't really negotiate with them. They've got high levels of technology, but they also are dangerous. So that automatically moves them below that, what we would consider B tier. And
I think that is the paternalistic way that the council views other races. What can they do for us?
Yeah,
that kind of transactional.
And are they even able to? Are we even able to work with them? That question of like, does diplomacy actually work with this race? And at some point, the answer was probably no for the Krogan.
Well, I mean, the council kind of sealed their own fate with the genophage. But,
right.
Of course, Garvug's history goes on before that. Right.
And it may not be simply the other race's fault. It's just the history of the way things have played out, right? Like the Citadel does stuff with the genophage that creates a problem with the Krogan. And they then define the Krogan as a race that we just cannot negotiate with. They will not negotiate with us anymore. So now they're completely off the table. And it very well may be due to their own actions.
There's only one other race in Mass Effect that it just came to me that I realized the council would be even less inclined to help, and it's the Batarians. If the Batarians had a colony similar like this that was invaded by corporations, I don't think they'd step in either.
Yeah. Or the Geth. I think the Geth are on that list as well, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in Mass Effect 2, no one considers the Geth to be like a sentient, race that should be defended at all. The race is created in contravention of Citadel conventions, and the Citadel Council really doesn't, view them as a race at all.
Or the Rachni. We never talk about the Rachni, right? They're considered a danger, but it's not like they're not an intelligent species.
It is almost like the council views the Krogan as like barely like as if they qualify sentience and worthiness of political representation, like they view the Krogan and the Rachni on the same level almost.
Yeah.
Which is ironic considering the council was all too happy to help to use the Krogan as weapons against the Rachni.
Well, it comes down to what is the thing this race does? Well, this race populates extremely quickly and is very aggressive and good on a battlefield. So therefore, those are the two things that the council finds any value in. Everything else is off the table. So how do we leverage the value we find in it? It's almost like the way a corporation treats, employees or anything that would be a tool in the mechanism of the corporation. Does that make sense?
It's very mercenary.
Yeah.
So, I was having fun with this, and, I'm involved in a lot of different Mass Effect forums and Discord servers, and I consulted a Garvug expert, if you will. I was talking about Garvug in a different forum, or rather a Discord server, and I came across this person, Sand Tiger, who cares very much about Garvug. In fact, has a manifesto written all about Garvug. This is like Sand Tiger's the area of expertise. And so I consulted Sand Tiger and I said, hey, I want to include you on these questions that Tom and I are going to talk about this week. And first of all, they wrote for each of the three questions. They wrote a lot, so I can't get to all of it. But I'm going to try and summarize what they said in this first question when we were talking about what do you believe the war on Garvug tells us about the way the council races view the Krogan, and what about the Vorcha? And Sand Tiger says effectively that the war shows how the council view them both as expendable and inferior, that the Krogan are seen as this, kind of militaristic threat, that the council continually has oppressed them over millennia now, and then demilitarized them through systemic prejudice. And one of those examples that Sand Tiger gives is the genophage. And I'll pull a quote from what they've written here. It says, "The fact is the council doesn't care about the Krogan being genocided on Garvug. We know they are very clearly okay with enacting genocide on the Krogan, the genophage lasting nearly 1,500 years under the auspices of the Council Demilitarization Enforcement Mission is proof enough of this. And the fact that the Council doesn't get involved as the war on Garvug rages is further proof. One could even go as far as to say that the destabilization of any Krogan power structures will inevitably cause disruptions that echo out into the many networks and communities that have, in some form or another, shaped themselves around the status quo of those power structures. This itself is no doubt a feature of the Citadel Council's base of power, which establishes and enforces domination over the Krogan, and which is intentional and explicit in its mission to keep the Krogan destabilized as a people. Krogan lives and Krogan interests do not matter and cannot matter to the council races because this runs completely counter to their own political interests. And I see exactly what they're getting at here, which is that the council's threatened by the Krogan because the council is well aware of what they've done with the genophage. They have consistently tried to undermine Krogan power since then because they are afraid, as evidenced by Morden's genophage editing thing to make the genophage still relevant.
Right.
The council is terrified of the Krogan being on equal footing as them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like, there's a reason why you try to keep these people down, and it's because they're a potential threat. And they have a very justifiable reason for being a potential threat due to the actions that you've made in the past. It's the hole that just keeps getting dug deeper, right? Like we see this in, look at American politics with something like slavery. There's a reason why there's a large contingent of people who are still upset at the way the United States government has handled minorities, and other groups, and because they did bad things in the past, and those people then feel upset, and then there are things that have been done historically in order to keep other people down, in order to keep them from getting power, because the people in power are afraid of any pushback that the other group would get if they gain power. It's a cycle, right? And it just keeps on reinforcing itself.
And to that point, even if and when the genophage is cured, if you decided to do that in Mass Effect 3, are we under this impression that all of a sudden all this discrimination against the Krogan will immediately evaporate? No, it will not.
No, it won't. That's
it will
right.
not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, slavery is another good example. You abolish slavery, but it doesn't mean that everyone's just all of a sudden going to forget of all the atrocities that happened under slavery. Like, that was the right thing to do. Removing the genophage is the right thing to do. But that doesn't mean that everything's forgiven. Like, right off the bat, like that would be unreasonable to expect. Like, if you are somebody who has lived your entire life in the ancestry of your people in a way where you've been treated absolutely terribly, it's going to take a while for people to get over that.
Well, that and the fact that, like, I think basically what we can expect to see if the next Mass Effect is a direct sequel to Mass Effect 3 and there's not like some huge time jump, I think we can probably expect to see more Krogan wanting to be involved in the political power structures of the Milky Way.
Yeah.
And I think that there's going to be a lot of pushback about that, especially from the Solarians, especially from the Turians.
Right.
And I think that conflict is probably going to be a major theme of the next Mass Effect. So,
and on top of that, to add to your point, I think a lot of those people are going to be female Krogan who are interested in, like, they are a minority among their own race, but they're also interested in what's going to happen with their children's lives. And so they are going to be even more motivated to get involved.
And as we know from the lore, the Krogan women have been basically peacemakers, at least, or not, Bakara was.
Yeah.
And that she holds considerable political sway among those on Tuchanka.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's a thing that we could very well expect from the next Mass Effect. But, we have two more discussion questions, I guess, if you want to call them. Sure. Kind of reviewing, debriefing after this war on Garvug, but I think we got to get to the mid-break.
All right, let's go thank our patrons, and we will be right back.
Message coming in. Patching it through.
I am sovereign, and this
Lorecast
is mine. I like the sound of that.
All right, we got to shout out all of our patrons. Thank you so much for your support and your continued support. If you would like to get a personal shout out, then you can go to patreon.com/Mass Effect Lorecast and sign up. And if you're one of our newest paid patrons, you're going to get a shout out on the next episode. Also, if you sign up as a Shepherd tier patron like these people, then you're going to get a shout out every episode, like Draco or Edboy, Kirasi, Lieutenant Ticino, Retrobot, Superfly, or William. Thank you so much for your support as well. Also, you can help support the show in other ways. You can leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. I don't have any new ones. Oh, actually, no, I have one new one that I think we somehow missed. Remind me if I read this one in the past. This one is from Dude AFSU 7777. I don't think I've read this one on the show yet. Who's from the United States. He writes, "Great podcast. The duo makes podcast highly entertaining. Plus, learn interesting tidbits of Mass Effect lore." Straight and to the point. Thank you so much for your 5-star review. Anybody else who leaves a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts will get read in a future episode of the show. Plus, you can rate the show on Spotify or whatever other platform you listen to us on. And you can also share us with your friends. All of that would be super helpful. And thank you for the support. All right, let's move on with the rest of this discussion. Here we go.
Spit it out, or are you trying to build suspense?
You're so dense, sir. Obviously, I do not know as much about human relationships as I thought.
So basically, I think that we can turn our attention to Krogan society, because besides what we see on the ground in Mass Effect 3, with the ancient Krogan society and what we learn from older Krogan like Rex about how Krogan society was before the genophage, we can't really learn a lot. However, we can also study what Krogan society is shown from Garvug, specifically because it's so focused, like, Krogan only episode plus Vorcha special guest.
Right.
Because it's a Krogan colony, right? So I wanted to talk about what can we infer about Krogan society from the extended lore that we get on Garvug. And I think that we can probably infer that Krogan society is a lot more stable than the Citadel Council's narrative would have us believe. Mm-hmm. When you take Krogan out of an environment that is constantly trying to kill them.
Yeah. Even when they were in danger in like the news briefings, when you get these little glimpses of like Krogan life and the responses and things, the tone of all of that comes across very like, hey, we're just chill. We just want to do our own thing.
Right. It's a backwater colony for all intents and purposes, Garvug is. And granted, when we talked at the beginning, we did mention that they had fished the planet to the point of ecosystem collapse. Yeah. But it was Garvug. It was a frozen like tundra wasteland where there's only a thin habitable band around the equator anyway. So it's not like there was a lot to go with.
Actually there to begin with. Yeah.
Right. So they did overfish because they also populate quickly, but we haven't seen any evidence that there was some kind of like huge unstable political situation on Garvug before these corporations launched a coup attempt. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And look at how quickly they united against the invader.
Yeah. Well, I think that is something we can draw a conclusion about. There's a lot of holes in the information. A lot of it comes from unreliable sources. We've dealt with that this whole time. But I think that is one thing that we can for sure understand is that the Krogan unite under situations that are dire. Like when they have to push back at something that's trying to murder them, they know how to do that. Like they stand united. And I mean, that seems like a very positive thing. This idea that like they don't subdivide. In fact, this is one of the things that a lot of conquering I guess you could say nations or corporations in this stance or whatever. Anybody who is trying to take power from other people, oftentimes they will try to divide them against each other so that they're more easy to manipulate. And yet in this situation, the Krogan stand united. And in fact, the Vorcha are included. You mentioned the Vorcha, and we don't even hear any infighting between the Krogan and the Vorcha. Like that would probably be the easiest thing to seed is like, oh, the Vorcha are against you, or oh, the Krogan are against you. But we don't even get any of that.
There was a little bit of like rumors of infighting between the Krogan and the Vorcha, but I'm pretty sure that turned out to be corporate propaganda.
Yeah. Like it was a tactic they tried to get to work and it just didn't really take off.
No, clearly not, because the resistance was doing quite well until the corporations lured them out into the open with a fake withdrawal. Yeah. But I also think that we can infer that Krogan society, even on another planet, is inherently set up to support smaller systems of government and smaller communities, because there's a clan chief.
Right. Yeah, it's like
clan
a clan
chief
system.
Hylot Ruined.
Yeah.
So it sounds like with Krogan society, it sounds a lot more like something that Jean-Jacques Rousseau would love, the social contract, where he argues that humanity was at its peak when it was at small communities. And it sounds like Krogan live in small communities. They did have a capital city, Dazil, which, by the way, is also a testament to Krogan stability, that they would be able to build and found an actual city without blowing it up when they were left to their own devices.
One that the corporations wanted to like take from them and then use as their own.
Something valuable enough that the corporations did not want to impact the infrastructure.
Right.
And granted, that could also be because there's Prothean data somewhere underneath the infrastructure. They didn't know where. They didn't want to damage that. But I really think that this whole Garvug lore series shines like bare the narrative that has come from the council races for pretty much the entire original trilogy of Mass Effect to this point, which was that the Krogan are inherently violent, they are savages, they're incapable of organization, and they will destroy themselves if left unchecked. Tuchanka's an awful place. They just are constantly killing each other, blah, blah, blah. And granted, we don't have data on crime rates on Garvug, right? But it doesn't sound like it was really all that unstable before the corporations moved in. So I want to go over what our Garvug expert Sand Tiger has to say. Sand Tiger basically says that it reveals that even though, despite being uplifted as these heroes after the Rachni Wars, the Krogan were very quickly marginalized by the Council races. They were given this bargain planet, Garvug, to colonize, which was, like we mentioned, barely habitable, and it reflected the Council's dismissive attitude toward their species. The environmental collapse on Garvug, Sand Tiger argues, is used as a justification for further oppression and stereotypes against the Krogan. It's important to note here, I'm interjecting with my own thoughts, that Garvug was one of the first worlds given to the Krogan. And it was a crappy world with not a lot to support life on it. And especially not for a race that already procreates very quickly. Right, with large litters, I guess you could say. With large clutches.
The fact that we go to that word means that the rhetoric from the Citadel is in our brains.
That's a great point.
Right? Like, we have even been co-opted as players of these games to see them more in line with a species of animal than a people by saying that they have lots of children, and so it's like a litter.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, look at me committing microaggressions against the Krogan. These are the things that, like, it's really not so much your fault as it is the way it has been communicated to you over and over and over and over again. Well, yeah, it's the narrative.
Right, it's the narrative. And even when we get to, and this is another really interesting point, even when we get to the point of being aware of the narrative, it doesn't mean that you are fully removed from it. It is still affecting you subconsciously.
Yes. And where I was going with that was to say that Garvug was one of the first planets, right? And then they gave them the perfect storm to have a planet's ecosystem collapse. They gave a fragile ecosystem with a thin habitable zone to a race that procreates very quickly, and especially in a post-war period of time. In post-war periods of time, people procreate quickly, and I'm fairly certain it would happen with any race.
Right.
So it's perfect storm given to the Krogan, and then when the inevitable happens and the ecosystem collapses, they use it as justification, Sand Tiger says, for saying, look at how barbaric they are. They can't even take care of this one planet we gave them. and they use that for justification of further systemic racism against the Krogan. That's basically what Sandtiger's saying here. I am summarizing very greatly because Sandtiger did go on for multiple pages about this topic.
Yeah, and it totally makes sense because they're not being fairly considered to one of the other races given that same exact scenario. Chances are any other race given that scenario would struggle as much as the Krogan. In fact, maybe the Krogan did better than any of the other races would have done in that scenario.
I was going to say, I feel like humanity probably would have abandoned the planet. They would have been like, screw this colony is not worth it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, think about it.
But the Krogan found a way.
Yeah, the Krogan, and that is completely an unfair comparison because the bar was set above their heads. There was no way they were ever going to reach that bar. But strangely enough, if you put anybody else underneath that bar, nobody else is going to reach it either. But you're not doing that, so you can't compare it.
Tell a frog to climb a tree, or how does that? Tell a fish to climb a tree, and then when it can't climb the tree, say, see, this is why you're lesser.
Right. Yeah, or like teaching a dog to read. Like, it doesn't matter how hard you try, you're never going to teach a dog to read because dogs won't be able to read. It doesn't mean
I'm going to pull an excerpt here from Sandtiger's writing verbatim. It says, the thing about Garvug that really makes it stand out is that this is the earliest known named colony planet, and there's some really interesting implications here. That the Krogan were being given colonies that are essentially just garbage heap planets this early on. By this point, the Rachni Wars had only been over for just 54 years. And the Krogan were the heroes of the Rachni Wars, the people that saved the entire galaxy. A codex entry on the Krogan rebellions describes the immediate post-war social climate as grateful to the Krogan, and that they were granted several new colony worlds in recognition of their efforts. In the span of 54 years, the Krogan have ostensibly gone from being galactic heroes to being, quote, placated. And what we're told is that this is a result of unprecedented population growth and the need for more Krogan colonies. It's all their fault, of course. Right.
And it's because the Citadel saw them as weapons or tools, not as people.
This is very similar to, this is a weird kind of parallel I'm drawing here, but very similar to how the Dunmer treat Argonians.
Okay.
In Elder Scrolls. Sure. I think I'm thinking of it because you're wearing the Red Diamond Courier shirt.
Right.
But yeah, they treat them as a means to an end. They don't see them as equals. And then they even in this period where the council is grateful to the Krogan, they give them a crap world.
Right.
They give them a crappy world when they're grateful. And then when the crappy world, the ecosystem collapses, and like anyone could have predicted, I'm not entirely convinced the Solarians didn't already predict that Garvug was going to, its climate was going to collapse.
It was unsustainable by any
That it was unsustainable.
Right.
That they didn't set them up to fail because they would know after the Krogan saved their asses in the Rachni Wars, shit, they're going to want payback. Or like they're going to want some kind of compensation.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
And this is not to minimize the Krogan aggression that we saw in the Citadel archives in Mass Effect 3. I think it's right after the Rachni Wars and at the start of the Krogan rebellions when the Krogan ambassador attacks the counselor over the Krogan, I think it's a Krogan occupation of Lucia. I might be wrong here. I'm totally going off of memory. There's nothing in the notes about this. Mm-hmm. This is not to discount that. The Krogan definitely, some Krogan certainly do have anger issues. However, they've also been put in this political situation that's absolutely impossible.
Right.
So, and they know it. They're like, they're the odd kid out. Like the Turians, the Asari, and the Solarians are the cool kids at the lunch table.
Yep.
And they're throwing chapstick at the Krogans and saying, there's your lunch.
Right.
Why are you still hungry?
Yeah. You're such a dork. No, you can't sit at our table, Krogan. Yeah.
God.
Yeah. And
they eat everything we give them.
Right. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. And so people, and we talk about this all the time. One of the great parts about this game series is how well it sets these things up. In fact, it's one of the core benefits of fantasy fiction or sci-fi fiction is that it takes these real world situations and extrapolates them out at a distance so that we can be more objective about them. But then when you bring them back and you compare them to reality, you go, oh, that's...
You mean when you bring them into our own narratives.
Right.
Yes.
Right. When you go,
as you pointed out to me.
Right. When you go, who are the Krogan like in our own? Oh, they're like, okay. And then you start to understand and you can empathize a little bit more and see things in a different light.
And it's not just about the Krogan. I feel like that we can really learn some important lessons about the way that the council works in Garvug specifically. So my last discussion question I wanted to go over is, given what we learned about the corporation's militarization, do you believe it poses any threat to settled worlds outside the Terminus systems?
Well, corporate militarization, I feel like that by itself is always going to pose a threat.
Oh, yeah.
So
for-profit militarization,
whether it's outside, inside the Terminus systems, on specific planets, heck, the Citadel at all, maintaining power in the long run.
And that is a key point that Sand Tiger brings up, that this is actually potentially destabilizing for everybody.
Yes. And I think, and again, this is reflections of our own society. Did you see the numbers on, was it Apple? I think it was Apple's total amount of income over the last year or something. Like, it was one of these numbers. It was like some ungodly billion amount of money. It was the market share, the trading market share of Apple in like the last few weeks hit something like 11.7% of the total GDP of the United States of America. That's what it was.
Holy crap.
11. That's the majority of the countries on this planet don't have that much money, but Apple does. Like, we are very quickly moving to a Mass Effect or a cyberpunk future where corporations could very well militarize on the scale of nations.
Well, I'm not going to sleep well tonight. But I think that in Mass Effect, the scale of militarization that was necessary for these three corporations to pull off an invasion of a planet that cannot be easy to support supply lines is very, very daunting. The fact that they were able to take on a Krogan planet nonetheless, where the Krogan are famously, they have, redundant organ systems. They're very hardy. They're very tough warriors. I cannot, this is, if I worked in whatever the Milky Way version of the UN would be, I would be raising alarm bells constantly about passing regulations to make sure corporations have to limit any kind of militarization to a bare minimum to be security forces or that kind of thing for their own colonies. Right. However, I also think that that this is potentially going to be a problem in the next Mass Effect for the Citadel Council. Yeah, I could see the plot line going that way. Absolutely. I mean, we've talked about the fact that there's going to be a power vacuum if it is a direct sequel to Mass Effect 3. I can imagine the rebuilding effort will enrich a lot of people as they're rebuilding kind of corporations and things like that. And those corporations, those people who are in charge of the rebuilding efforts, like maybe even contractors, are going to want to protect their investments. Right, right. And this situation, this example that we have in the whole Garvug thing, was kind of ham-handed by the corporations at times. There are times where they absolutely fumbled the ball, but in the end, they won. Imagine these corporations with more experience actually succeeding in most of the things they're trying to do. That becomes very scary. Oh, yeah. And the fact that there were political lines drawn, basically. Yeah. They learned how far they could go without the council wanting to interfere. Yeah. They tested the boundaries. Right. And I think that's particularly terrifying. Now, consulting our Garvug expert, Sand Tiger, he argues, or I'm sorry, I should say they argue, the militarization of corporations as seen on Garvug poses a serious threat to settled worlds, especially those outside the Terminus systems, saying that essentially even with their status of being Citadel space entities, that the council was not at all caring about their, pushing Krogan into graves, the other atrocities that they were either proven or alleged to have committed, and that they only stepped in when Prothean technology was discovered. We talked about this. Sand Tiger says that reveals the council's real concern is not for justice, it's for power. Yep. It's for power and knowledge. And, knowledge is power, and not to quote G.I. Joe or anything. But
okay.
Basically, it's how much the council didn't do. They did not hold the corporations accountable, only when they threatened to take Prothean technology away from the council. And that itself shows that the council can do more or less whatever it wants. I'm going to quote here a little bit verbatim from Sand Tiger's excerpt that they've written. Sand Tiger says, "This is all to say that provided the corporations navigate around the arbitrary rules of the council and do not challenge its power, they appear to have a wide latitude to do just about whatever they want, including invading settled worlds and massacring populations. Anyone with sense should be afraid of that."
You know who else is learning from all of this? Cerberus.
Apple?
Apple. Alphabet.
Alexa?
Meta. Cerberus absolutely is paying attention to all of those lessons. And that's even scarier because we know what their agenda is. We're like, ugh.
Yeah. And you know what? Like we mentioned earlier, that this is happening during the Collector invasions. So there's like two huge geopolitical crises going on. And what is the council doing? I think it gives them a pass. I think it gives them a pass if we just rely on this and say, well, they're lazy. Yeah. They're not lazy.
Right.
They're calculated.
Right.
And they simply don't care until it threatens their own power.
Right.
Actually, I hate to liken this to the Elder Scrolls again, but the Empire is a lot like this. The Empire doesn't step in for crises until it threatens them.
No, I mean, I think typically most empires are like that.
Well, even when it threatens the Empire's provinces, like their own provinces, until it hits Citadel, the actual, the homeland, the homogenous Imperial's seat of power.
Yeah,
that's when they care.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very Empire thing. The further you get from the center, the further you get out to those people over there, the less you're concerned about it. The more that's a cost you can deal with later.
And that being said, that basically we can infer from all of this that the council doesn't have the people of the Terminus systems. They don't care about them. They don't care about their well-being. If a corporation is militarized and wants to invade their world, so be it. What does it say about the Spectres, who are above the accountability of even the council?
Right. Well, I think we see some of what that sees, and that some of them just kind of go off and do whatever they want. And it also plays into your role in Mass Effect, the ability for you to make those decisions. And everyone can make different decisions,
Yeah. You have the power, and with that comes great responsibility.
We're just going to quote everything you watched as a child. Spider-Man, G.I. Joe. Is there a Transformers quote somewhere? We have that. Ninja Turtles?
Turtles in disguise? I don't know.
Ninja kick the damn rabbit. That's burned in my head from the very first Ninja Turtles movie, way back, way back, when they're like hiding out and they're watching the cartoons on the TV, and it's like the Tortoise and the Hare cartoon. It's like a Looney Tunes cartoon or something, and Michelangelo just like goes, "Ninja kick the damn rabbit." Little kid me was like, "Oh my god, that's so good." You're not supposed to say "damn."
Core memory.
Yeah.
But yeah. for everyone who was excited for us to be done with Garvug, we are now done. You can applaud now. And I know that there was at least one person who has also been posting in that same Mass Effect Discord server saying, "Oh my God, I just want to hear other lore, not Garvug." They have spent so much time on Garvug. We are done with Garvug.
We're done.
However,
we're moving on.
However, we are not done with Cerberus Daily News storylines. We will resume those at some point in the future. But I wanted to take this time to announce what our next series of episodes is going to be on. And I love this one. I think a lot of people are going to like this too. Since we've been talking about the Krogan, I want to talk about Rex.
Awesome. I love Rex. Rex is great. I'm looking forward to that.
Rex.
Also, we've got a patron chat coming up. We got that coming up. It's the end
that's
of the
next
month.
week.
Man, the last few weeks just like exploded, like almost literally for me, and totally gone. And I'm going to be gone this next week because I had a vacation planned months ago that I didn't expect to get almost interrupted by hurricanes. Thankfully, there aren't any other hurricanes on their way. We don't have to worry about that, so I can still go on vacation. But I think the plan right now, correct me if I'm wrong, is you guys, you're going to host the patron chat. You guys are still going to get together?
That's right. Yeah, I'm planning to solo host the patron chat. Me and the patrons are going to throw a party while Dad is out of town.
Wow.
It's going to be great. Wow. And we promise that there will be no booze. Wink, wink.
I'm going to tune in. I'm going to be like on vacation. I'm going to be like, I wonder what's going on. I'm going to pull out my phone. I'm going to pull up Sam's Twitch feed, and everyone's going to be like clinking glasses together, like sharing mixed drinks.
Hey, man, prep the keg.
Hey, have you ever tried this mixer over here with this? I don't know. I don't drink enough to even know names of things anymore. But I hope you guys have a lot of fun. And I'm sorry I'm going to miss this one, but I hope everybody has a blast. And that means that you still have a week to sign up on the Patreon. If you want to sign up at the tier where you get to join us for patron chats, you can still do that. You can hang out. You can chime in on the Discord. Let people know what topic you might want to discuss this week. That's what everybody at that tier gets the ability to do. So if there's something you really want to join us and talk about, you're welcome to say, hey guys, I really want to talk about this. Cool with that? So lots of fun stuff coming still down the pipe, and I'm excited to talk about Rex. That sounds like a lot of fun as well.
Oh yeah, he Rex.
Yep. All right.
Night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. All right. Well, we got to wrap this up. Sam, anything else you want to share before we go?
Yeah. So you remember how I was saying I've been reprising my role as Jarvis in the Avengers audio drama.
Yeah.
I almost said Garvug, by the way.
Garvug Jarvis. The Jarvis
It's pronounced Jarvug. No. So I've been reprising my role as Jarvis in the Avengers audio drama series.
Wait a minute. That's going to be the new debate. Is it GIF or JIF? Is it Garvug or Jarvug? Jarvug. I want to go jump on that Discord and see what everyone votes. I want that to be a vote.
You know what? I'm just going to do that right after. I'm going to do that right after this. And by the way, if anyone's curious about that Discord server I was talking about, it's called Mass Effect Forever. There's so many people in there who love talking about Mass Effect lore. But anyway, on the note of my voice acting, I have expanded now, and I did a small part as a Canadian general in a Wolverine versus Hulk episode.
What was that all about, eh?
I intentionally did not try to characterize the Canadian accent because I know a lot of Canadians in real life, and their accents are not that different from a lot of regions of the United States, the South not included. Sorry, Georgia. Sorry, Florida.
sorry, Texas.
Sorry, Alabama and Mississippi. But anyway, it's coming out, I think, soon. I have gotten an advanced kind of preview of how it sounds. I think it sounds great. The writing is amazing. So look for Hulk versus Wolverine audio drama, and you'll have to listen for me. I think you'll identify my voice. Other than that, life is great. You know, I'm resuming streaming now that the wedding is over. Life is getting a little bit back to normal. I'm streaming my headcanon Mass Effect 3 run, and by the way, I'm getting very close to the ending. So if you want to see me and my headcanon ending to the original trilogy, come and follow me on Twitch at In7Legend, and I tweet out notifications about that on Twitter as well.
Awesome.
Same handle.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. You'll know his voice because he will be the really friendly one. I just had to slide another Canadian thing in there.
I do. Well, it's funny. I do sound friendlier than the guy I'm talking to in the scene, who sounds very gruff.
Okay. All right. Well,
So I do not sound so gruff in that scene.
Nice. Well, go check that out. And of course, you can check out my other shows if you're into this lore cast and you like Fallout or Elder Scrolls or The Lord of the Rings or Starfield. Those are the ones I'm currently doing. You can go check those out. Everything's at robotsradio.net if you want to check out my shows or other shows on the network. There's lots of great content out there. Come join us for all that stuff. And I won't be back next week, but I'll be back the week after that. And I hope you guys have a wonderful patron chat, and I'll see you next time. Have a good night, everybody. See you later. Thanks for tuning into the Mass Effect Lorecast. We'd love to hear your opinion and thoughts on the lore of Mass Effect. Reach out to us on Twitter at Mass Effect Cast, or check out the Robots Radio Discord. Also, you can send us an email at masseffectlorecast@gmail.com.